If you've ever grown tomatoes, you've most likely used one of these at one point or another. Now, these are labeled as tomato cages in big box stores, but I don't think they should be called that for a number of reasons. First of all, these things are way too short for most tomato varieties. Most tomatoes get anywhere from 4 to 10 feet tall, and when you stick these things in the ground, they only stand about 2 feet tall. So what's going to happen is when your tomato plant outgrows this thing, is the stems are actually going to bend over the sides and they're going to snap. And it's happened to me before, and I've lost harvests, I've lost crops because of this. And another reason these things are not good for tomatoes is that they're very flimsy. This one here, as you can see, hopefully, it actually broke at the weld here. And you know, they're just made of this really thin wire, cheap, flimsy wire, and you know, the ends will bend on you. It'll make it harder to put them in the ground, and they're just really cheap in general, and they're no good for tomatoes. These things are not good for tomatoes, like I say, but they are good for peppers and eggplants. They're very good. They do a great job supporting those plants, because peppers in general only get around 2 to 3 feet tall, and same with eggplants. So don't necessarily toss these if you have them, but don't use them for tomatoes. I'm going to show you a better cage that won't make you rage. These tomato cages behind me are the ultimate tomato cages. These things are just amazing. They're way better than these cheap, crappy store-bought ones. Now, this is made from something called concrete reinforcement wire. I actually bought a 50-foot roll of this at Lowe's for about $100, I think. I could be wrong. It was about 5 years ago that I built these cages. But anyway, so what I did was I went out, I bought a roll, and I made myself 10 tomato cages. So that's about $10 a cage. These cages are about 1.5 feet in diameter, and I just cut off. So I cut off lengths of 10, and then what I did is I just rolled them up. I mean, they're pretty much already rolled because they're in a roll, right? I bent the wires sticking out at one of the edges into kind of these hook shapes. And what that does is it allows you to actually connect the two sides of the cage together, giving you a nice cylindrical cage that's great for growing tomatoes. There's a number of things that make these cages just absolutely amazing, and right now we're gonna get into that. So the first thing that's great about these cages is they're super sturdy. So I've had these cages for 5 years now, and you know, they've lasted me up until now. They're still going strong. They're connected by these welds. This material is actually used to reinforce concrete. That's why it's called concrete reinforcement wire. It's to prevent the concrete from actually cracking. So it's super sturdy, and your tomato plants will not bend the wires on this thing because they're just so strong, so sturdy. The second great thing about using these cages is that it's a super low effort way to trellis or support your tomato plants. You don't have to do any pruning. You don't have to do any, tying your plants up to the stakes or up to the trellis. It's just kind of plug and play. You put the cage over the plant at the beginning of the season, and you don't have to prune it all. Just let it grow, let it fill out the cage, and it'll support it real nice. So you might be wondering, well, what's stopping these cages from just falling over, right? They're pretty tall. What's stopping the wind or the plant from just pushing it over? Well, this is what. So in the bottom, let me see if I can pull this out a bit. Basically what I did is I cut off the bottom ring, so that exposes about 6 inches of wire. So this is a 6-inch long wire going to the ground, and I've got those all around here. So, just pushing those wires into the ground. It's a very sturdy structure, and like I said, the diameter is 1.5 feet approximately, so it's very stable. I've never actually had one of these things fall over, so it's really unnecessary to use stakes to hold the cage in place. It's basically a freestanding skyscraper. Unless you're in a super windy climate, I would not say you need any sort of other staking method to keep the cage upright. Yet another super great thing about these cages is that they have really nice sized holes that you can easily fit your hand through to harvest or prune. Now, I see a lot of videos on YouTube where people are using animal fencing or, you know, some sort of fencing, and the problem with it is that the bars are too close together and it makes it super hard, actually pretty much impossible to reach in and actually, you know, access the plant. So with these, it's super easy. You know, you got these 6 by 6 inch squares, and I have pretty long fingers, pretty big hands, and I can easily reach into that. You know, whether you're pruning off suckers or harvesting fruit, it's super easy. So that's another amazing thing about these cages. So these cages are only about 5 feet tall, and like I said before, tomato cages can get super tall. They can get 10 feet and higher. And so what do you do about that, right? Well, I'll tell you what. What you can do is you can actually stack these cages together. So, see how it's only about 5 feet? What you can do is you can get another cage and you can actually set it on top of this one. And then what you can do is just use like 3 zip ties, you know, around the edges of this cage. Zip them together, like so. Just zip. I don't know why I did that noise. Then you can get a 10-foot tall tomato cage, or you can even get a higher one if you stack, you know, 3, 4, even 5 cages. I mean, if your tomato plants are growing that tall, I think you have probably way too much nitrogen in your soil. The whole point is it's a modular system. You can easily extend the cage, and the best thing about it is you don't have to do it right away. It's unlike staking where you have to actually put the stake in at the beginning of the season, otherwise you risk damaging the roots later on. With this, if you stack another cage on, it's obviously not going to hurt the roots. It's not going to hurt anything, you know. So you can add it now, you can add it later, once your plant reaches the top of the cage, and it's just really nice and flexible that way. Yet another amazing thing about these cages is that they're extremely versatile. You don't have to just use them for tomatoes, you can also use them for climbing crops such as cucumbers, which I have right here, as you can see. This is a English type cucumber called English Telegraph, and it's climbing up this tomato cage, or cage should I say, because it's not just for tomatoes. And these tendrils here will just wrap around it. Let's see if we can find, oh, right here, see that? The tendrils will just wrap themselves around, and the rust actually makes a really nice surface for the tendrils to grab onto. So it's really cool, really neat. You can also use these cages for squash, string beans. Pretty much the sky's the limit with these things. Now, one thing about these cages that I think some people might not like is that they rust. And for me, I actually like the rust because it gives it that nice naturistic, rustic look. And also I find it actually camouflages into the environment a lot better than if it were, say, some silver galvanized wire. A lot of people like to use stuff like cattle panel. Cattle panel works really well for trellises, but as far as cages, probably not so well, because you need to have it kind of curved already in order to make that round shape. It's a matter of opinion whether you like the rust or not. The only thing about the rust is you want to be careful, especially if you haven't had your tetanus shot. You might want to get that, because you don't want to be getting any diseases now, do you? The only major disadvantage I can see of these cages is that they can be pretty difficult to store. So what I've been doing for the past 5 years is I've just been kind of nesting them inside one another, and so it's kind of difficult to do. You kind of need an extra person to help you out with this. What you can do is you can just pry open the bars and, like I said, actually nest the cages inside one another. And you know, it's not that hard if you have someone helping you, but it can be a bit of a pain in the neck, especially the next season when you're trying to get out the cages and take them all apart. Sometimes they hook together, and it can be a bit annoying, but that's a small price to pay for all the pros I see in these cages. I hope that you get out there and build yourself some of these awesome cages. They're just the best cages that you could possibly have. And if you have any ideas on how to support tomatoes, or if you have any questions for me, make sure you leave those in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say, and I'll answer your questions as soon as possible. I'm Lucas. I make new gardening videos every week. I thank you so much for watching this video, and as always, grow it best.